Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to an episode of Outside the Panels. I am your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and joining me today, we have another Brit. Can you believe it? Another Brit. How cool is that? Yeah. We are talking to creator Jon Lock. John.
Another John at that.
Yeah, well, it's Johnny, but I'll let you off on that one. That's fine. So, John, you're here to talk to us about a special project. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically my comic Afterlife Inc has just celebrated its 10th anniversary, and so thank you, incredibly, kind of releasing the entire series as these two massive hardbacks, and we're currently on Kickstarter with it.
Kickstarter, excellent. So, have you had a chance to look at where you are on Kickstarter?
Phenomenally, we're funded. We're a week in, and we're about 117% funded. I think, which has just been, well, it's been kind of mind blowing. Really, it hasn't sunk in yet.
Right. Okay. In that case, let's have a look, shall we? Let's see, because we just have it. I just so happen to have it. Yeah.
Oh, this is God. The live tension here is
live as we are. Are you ready? But there you go. That's exactly where you are.
Very nice.
That is cool, isn't it? £9,397 of an 8,000 goal. What impresses me, John, about that is the number of backers you've got. That is huge.
Well, I mean, thank you. It's I got to say, like, it really did kind of blow me away, because I mean, even after kind of 10 years, it's like you always kind of, in indie comics, you always kind of like hope for the best, but generally expect the worst. And I've never been this prepared for a Kickstarter before. I've been shouting about it from the rooftops. People for weeks now. People are probably sick of me hearing about it.
No such thing.
And yeah, it was. I must say, it's incredibly gratifying. We had an amazing 48 hours, and I've just been in a bit of a daze ever since, to be honest.
It must make you feel so proud, because I mean, you've got this book. It's been around a while, with all due respect, and you put it together as a collection, and people just lap it up. They just really love what you've created and the ideas behind it. How's that make you feel for this project? And what sort of pressure does it put on the next one?
Well, you're right to bring up the pressure, because I think I've got the kind of mind where, like, I can never stop to smell the roses. So even though this is wonderful, my brain's already thinking about, like, now it means we're gonna have to do another. As it happens, the series I think is going to run for 9 books. So we've done 6 so far, and 3 per kind of like big collected edition, and and it's just I do feel a bit of a daze, really, and I don't know at what point you're allowed to start enjoying yourself, if you know what I mean, because.
Now's it, man.
I suppose, I suppose it would be. But yeah, it just feels like it's always the grind, and maybe I've been caught up in that for too long. But I'm hoping there will at least be a moment somewhere between. I think we've done a few Kickstarters in the past, and I've always said that, like, probably the happiest moment in my life as a creator is that wonderful window between kind of finishing a Kickstarter and then waiting 2 weeks before Kickstarter does anything with it, because that's one period where you've got all the kind of, if you're lucky, you've got all the kind of gratification, but there's no obligation because you can't do anything with it yet.
So you just sat there counting the money. Yeah.
I mean, because clearly that's why we all got into comics, because it's.
Do you think?
Definitely the money.
Yeah. Says me, who's doing this for free. Absolutely, yeah. Even then, I'm paid too much. So tell us about the book. Tell me about Afterlife Inc. Then what's the premise? Because I looked at it and I thought of a really old joke about recruitment consultants, which I'll tell you after you tell me your bit.
Well, in a nutshell, Afterlife Inc. is about a con artist named Jack Fortune who dies, discovers an afterlife in chaos, and then decides to take over and run it like a business. Hence, Afterlife Inc., a company you can believe in. Thus, kind of proving that the entire comic is nothing but is hanging on nothing but a few poor jokes, basically, because everything is.
That's harsh.
Well, yeah, it started out from quite kind of like humble beginnings. I mean, I never really set out to be a self-publisher. I think when I started out, I had this somewhat naive opinion. I was young, that like the only way comics got made was that you kind of like you wrote a script and then I don't know, the phone just magically started ringing and it was Marvel, and then you never had to worry about anything again.
This is it. I mean, it's great to have you on the show, because when people talk to me about British comics, it stops at 2000 AD.
Yeah,
and it also starts there. There's when people talk about independent UK comics, there's not a massive like batch of companies saying, "Hey, look at us!" Not like in the States where you've got Vault and you've got Ahoy and you've got Valiant when they get that together eventually, and all the big independents like Dark Horse and Image, for instance. How do you kind of?
You're absolutely right. It's really it's wild in a way because as you've rightly kind of said, it's like what do we have in the UK? We've got 2000 AD. We've maybe at a push got Titan, perhaps. To
be fair, Titan, they do a lot of books. It is, I mean, they do well for Doctor Who.
They do very good work. It's obviously a lot more kind of licensed kind of stuff,
which is fine, because I mean that's how Dark Horse started, right? And boom, and IDW, but all three still do licensed books.
But you're right in saying that like there's definitely kind of like a gap. We're lacking in kind of like mid-level publishers.
Yeah.
It's funny because I know a few people who actually run an illustration course at a local university. And they said they get a lot of students coming through going like, I really want to work in comics. I want to do X, I want to do Y. And we said, well, the thing is, if you study law, there's like a reasonable expectation that when you graduate, you can get a degree as you can work as a lawyer. He said the problem is we can't really offer like a comics course because in the UK, we're like, where would you go? Like there isn't. It just doesn't work like that. But I mean, like way back in 2011. That's when I like properly started going to UK conventions, and of course, we had like the Comic Village. We had this little, quite an in-depth, quite an established community of like indie creators. And I started talking to people, and I was like, "So how the hell do you get a table? Like, how did you do this?" And they're like, "Oh, well, you just talk to, this guy." I'm like, "Oh, that's good to know." And what's this banner thing? And they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's 30 quid off eBay." And it went, and that was it. And that was like the gateway thing. And then. There were just all these people kind of doing it themselves, and I was like, well, maybe I'll give it a try. And I had like one little short story, and I thought, well, maybe I'll do another and another. And before I knew it, despite, as I said, never intending to be a self-publisher, I suddenly had enough for a fairly respectable kind of graphic novel.
Cool.
And the first ever show I did, and I swear this is like the biggest, greatest start I could have hoped for, was the London Super Comic Con in 2012.
All right, excellent.
A now defunct show, but it was Stan Lee's first UK appearance in like 10 years, I think. And they had like Stan Lee at one side of an aircraft hangar, and then they had like maybe like 10 tables selling comics. So like as soon as people had finished queuing for Stan Lee, they're like, "What do we do now?" And so there's me going like, "Hey, I'm here and I've never sold a comic before and I'm terrified." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I guess we'll see how it goes." And I just had the most phenomenal first show you could have ever hoped for. Just because people were there and trapped and bored. But that's the thing, once I got them, they were like, "Oh, when's the second book coming?" And
that's it.
It just kind of snowballed from there.
So, how do you kind of, because I've mentioned 2000 AD, all right? We'll have a quick look at one of the covers whilst we're here. Boom. Oh, look at that. It's quite nice, isn't it? Quite cartoony in places. I found it interesting that there's a swathe, if that's the right word. That's a collective noun for a group of artists. There's a swathe, a gallery. There's a gallery of artists. There we are. That's the new collective noun I've just created.
A panic of artists, I think, is the collective noun.
I think it's a panic of deadlines.
Yeah, I was trying to add it all up, and it's actually the number keeps varying. I was trying to work out how many artists have worked on the series over the decade, and it's like, well, it's X number if you count the people doing sequentials, and then it's Y number if you count the people doing pinups. So it kind of wobbles a bit, but I think it's about 50, 60 odd in total. So yeah, it's kind of wild when you actually look at it on paper.
So then, let me ask you this then. So the 2000 AD model is very, very much chapters and different characters, different stories, and so on and so forth. Looking through the book, which we'll do in just 2 seconds, there are, as I say, a panic of artists. We can just see a number of them there. Each one comes with their own style. How hard was that to kind of was that to manage as a writer? Because I assume that each beat of the story has a different impact, and you want the art to represent that in some way.
Oh, massively, yeah. I certainly in the first book, because again, the kind of like curse of indie publishing. You're like, well, making a massive book in one go was too kind of pricey back then. So I was like, okay, I'll start with like these kind of little small stories, and that'll allow me to also kind of just tell some fun little adventures from the world. So of course, that's also an opportunity to work with a bunch of different people, and it was mostly just kind of like nepotism, really. I was like, hey, like, you're a good friend, like, we've drunk, we've had drinks at a convention, could I commission you to do a story? And then people were like, oh, I really like this kind of anthology vibe you're going for, but all in a shared universe. And I was like, well, it wasn't intentional. It was kind of like accidental, if anything. But then the beauty of it was kind of going like, oh, well, as you say, how can I match an artist's style to the story in question? Now, the art we're seeing here, that's Ash Jackson, who was the very first artist on the series. And it, in many ways, kind of defined the look and feel of the book. Like, Ash was so kind of instrumental. And also, like, the very first story, this was the first time I'd ever properly seen one of my scripts kind of brought to life. So I remember just having like these images on my phone, kind of like circa 2011, and it was some awful brick back then. But
it would be the Nokia.
Yeah, it was all like green, very very monochrome. But I just remember being blown away by it, and of course, not knowing anything about all the practical stuff that will come later, like file format and all the boring stuff that comes with making a book. But
the techie stuff.
A really fun thing was that in the very first volume, Dying to Tell, we had a chap called Roy do the artwork for chapter 3, which was this kind of like psychedelic film noir kind of story. And years later, in volume 4, which was illustrated by David Tinto, who's since gone on to do Commanders in Crisis for Image with Steve Orlando.
Yes. Okay.
And I think he's now doing like a Superior 4 thing for Marvel.
Is that? Oh, that'll be out of the Devil's Reign thing.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm personally struggling to keep up with some of the Marvel stuff at the moment.
I love Devil Reign, but man, Superior 4.
It's a lot of Dr. Octopuses, as I understand it.
It is. It's basically 4 characters with octopus arms. That's it. That's it. From the multiverse, because you know what? If it's not a multiverse, it doesn't happen.
The multiverse being the greatest gift and curse to afflict the comics industry.
Do you know what I think it is? We've segued a little bit, I think. Do you know what my problem is with mainstream comics? Is that one person gets a good idea and then everybody does it. I remember when Batman came out with Batman Black and White, and it was great. Since then, you've had Elektra, you've had Vampirella, You've got a Red Sonja book. You've got a Superman. You've had a Wonder Woman, all with that whole black and gold or blue and red. Or like, for Christ, just stop. And now we've got the multiverse. Marvel are doing it. DC are doing it. Not Valiant. Dynamite have been doing one. You know, the Buffy's books are doing it. It's like, and the Turtles have done it now. I'm like, for Christ's sake.
We've also got, I think, everyone's doing like an old, like quote unquote old man version, because we had Old Man Logan, and now it's like old Lady Harley, Old Man Hawkeye,
Old Lady Wanda back last year when she was getting killed off in the X-Men.
There's no idea good enough that it can't be repeated 100 times.
But this is the thing that you're absolutely right. It's a curse as much as it is, because the reason why we like these characters is they've been around for ages and they're massive icons. But the problem is, because they've been around for ages, it's really hard to do something fresh with them.
Yeah.
So you've kind of got to buy into all the other stuff that goes on around them. Whereas indie books, their ideas are super fresh, they're super, could go anywhere. But the problem is you don't get the straightaway buy-in that you would get from a well-known property such as Batman or Spider-Man.
Oh, so absolutely.
It's like some sort of equation that says for great randomness in storytelling, you must have a poorly received character that's not a cross-media character. And you're like, oh, okay. Do it the other way, and it's like, hey, you can sell bedclothes and pajamas, but your books aren't anywhere near as original. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, like, going to conventions for, a decade, and that was really our bread and butter for the longest time as like a little team. Oh yeah, sorry, because we have a company called Big Punch Studios, which kind of sprung out of Afterlife Inc. and my friend Nick's comic 7 String. But yeah, like, going for the longest time, when you're there alongside, Spider-Man or whatever, and it's like people are looking for what they recognize, and the greatest honor I think a convention goer can pay us is when they look at your stuff and go, and then they're like, hang on a minute, they're like, this looks like semi-professional, but I don't recognize any of the characters. And then it's like, that's when they're lured in, and then their defenses are down, and then they're like, oh yeah, actually, tell us about this. And we never do the hard sell. We just let them kind of explore, and it's great. Like, you sell the first book, that's wonderful, but when they come back for the second, like, that's magic. That's incredible.
I remember being at Thought Bubble a couple of years back. It'll be about 3 years back actually now, and I'd I can't remember his name. Who wrote Void Space? It was Ryan Sullivan. Ryan Sullivan. Yeah, Ryan Sullivan. And I'd interviewed him on the show, and I bumped into him. I said, "Hey man, how's it going?" And we're talking and just like shooting the breeze, catching up, sort of thing. And this bloke comes over, and because I'm talking to Ryan, he looks at me and goes, "So what's this book like?" That's exactly. And I was like, "Well, did you like?" Because he had a new book out. I said, "Do you like Void Space?" He goes, "Yeah, it was all right." I was like, "Yeah, it's nothing like that, but it's different. Check it out. It's by the same guy." And I end up doing like, "This is Ryan. He's the writer. He knows all the stuff. Talk to him." And the guy walked away with a couple of books. I'm thinking to myself, if I wasn't there talking to him, would he have even stopped by? I mean, I'm not a celebrity in any shape, way, or form, but it's that thing. It's that connectivity. You see someone talking, so it's like, oh, they must be interesting. Let's go and talk to them.
Well, yeah, it's you're clearly doing the good work there, basically. But yeah, it's like kind of just realizing like it would seem the only real difference now between kind of indie creators and the big leagues is, well, it's certainly not a lack of creativity, because I think everybody's got it in spades. It seems to be promotion. People often talk about, how would you help indie comics, and do we need another publisher? Do we need X, Y, or Z? I often think a viable means of promoting your stuff and getting it out there would be fantastic, because it's like, if people don't know about your comic, they're never going to give it a try. But if they like it, then if they discover it and like it, that's great. If they discover it and hate it, well, nothing lost really. But it's just, there's so much good stuff out there.
So hey, any indie creators out there, you want to talk to us about your books, by all means, get in contact. It's dead easy, you know.
And I can attest, like, you know, as you think Johnny's like pleasant in person, very pleasant behind the scenes, and also the technical setup here is through the roof. Like, it's really just oh, look at that! It's even got pop-ups and everything. Like, I'm feeling very country bumpkin right now. I'm quite impressed.
Well, hey, you do podcasts, so you know, never. I might be a guest one time. I can help you out. So there you go. There's some social medias. Check those out. You've got Twitter and you've got the Instagram. Write it down or pause it. Just don't pause it when my face is being in a queer place. I have enough problems with this face without you stopping it when it makes a funny look. All right, thank you. That's good. Excellent. Okay, so if you're interested in the Kickstarter, of course, there you go. Dead easy. I'll put the link up there, but to be honest, all you need to do is go to Kickstarter and type Afterlife, and boom, you'll take you there. Okay.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, I do not pretend to be an expert, but we have a degree of search engine optimization, such as that's the hot buzzword. So if you Google Afterlife Inc, you'll probably get to where you're trying to go.
Definitely go for it. Right, we're going to take a break for one of our other adverts. So, big two, John. Are you a Marvel or a DC fan? Please say.
I was born Marvel.
Oh, okay.
I was born Marvel. I strayed over the years because of Grant Morrison. But I think at my core, I'm probably a Marvel man.
Oh yeah. All right. Here we go then. So here's an advert just for John. It's a no price podcast. That's right. The No Price Podcast drops alternate Tuesdays for all your Marvel, Disney Plus, and MCU news. So check out the new one coming out soon, because you know it's Obi-Wan time. You know what I'm saying? Get your lightsabers ready. I sense a presence I have not felt since. All right. There you go. Star Wars. Nice easy Star Wars quote for you. So, John, take us back. How did you get into comics? How did you kind of fall into the craziness that is comic books?
Well, I guess kind of it's not really going to come as much as a surprise if you know you talking to UK based people, but probably the standards of like Beano, Dandy, all the kind of kids comics that were out there. Two real kind of life changing moments for me were one, discovering Sonic the comic in the mid 90s. Which, you know, there's a lot of kind of 90s kids for whom that was quite influential. And it did kind of blow my mind, because that's when I started to notice that there were names behind the comic. And that's when I discovered that Richard Elson was this amazing artist who everybody in my school, my primary school, just idolized. But I was the one guy who couldn't draw, because me and my friends, we made a shameless ripoff comic called Big Punch. Put a pin in that. And being the one guy in the friendship group who couldn't draw, I started writing scripts. And I discovered that there was a guy who wrote the comics as well, and his name was Nigel Kitchen.
All right, okay.
The years roll by. I start kind of getting into Marvel because they were a little easier to find in the UK. The Panini reprints.
Yeah.
And loved them, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of like the second life-changing moment for me was discovering Grant Morrison's JLA in my local bookshop in Ottakers.
Mm-hmm.
And
I haven't heard that name in years.
I know. It's
wow.
God, and they had all these kind of it was all like actually, frankly, thinking back about it, a lot of Grant Morrison stuff. They had like a lot of 80s, Vertigo, and I remember flicking through trade paperbacks of The Invisibles, and just being like, oh my god, like what is this? This isn't Spider-Man.
There'll be some Doom Patrol in there as well, I suppose, at that time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I really got into Grant Morrison, and that's when I was like, oh my god, like, and this is not a plug, but I now co-host a podcast where we're going through Grant Morrison's run on JLA one issue at a time.
Wow, send me an invite for that, because I would be so down for that. I'm loving some
Yeah,
Chalet.
we will definitely talk about that for sure. But yeah, like that was the most kind of influential thing for me, because I was like, these are I'm going to be very simplistic here, but it's like a superhero. This is a superhero story, and I know who Superman is. I've seen the cartoon, but this is weird. Like it's odd. The characters are talking. They're not talking like regular heroes. Like, what on earth is happening? It genuinely was kind of life changing. And I was like, who's this Grant Morrison? I need to kind of pay attention. And so I then started just kind of aggressively tracking down as much Grant Morrison content as I could, and that kind of got me into all the Vertigo titles from the 80s. And it's funny, like I do feel like I'm kind of trapped between eras, because I started making comics, and the one thing I desperately, like, my whole dream was just to make a classic long running series with an end, which would be like those series I used to read, where it'd be like, I'm not going to put myself on the same pedestal, but like Sandman, where it's like, you get 10 volumes sitting nicely on a shelf. And of course, getting into comics just at the time where like that model doesn't
exist anymore. Yeah,
it does not exist anymore. No. And then everyone's like, oh, you should be doing web comics, and it's long form storytelling online is difficult.
I think web comics work for the short, snappy.
100%. Yeah.
Like I've forgotten their name already. Hench Girl was a web comic, and that worked so brilliantly as kind of like a boom. It's like one page, start, middle, end. That's the joke. That's the punchline. Job done. Brilliant.
Yeah. No, it's so bizarre, because I've been releasing Afterlife Inc. online, and it's got a bit of a following, but really our area has always been kind of selling the physical books. But it's so funny, because I also made a kind of kids webcomic with a friend of mine, because technically I have a background in biology. I'm a failed scientist. So we made this me and my friend made a kids comic, which was all about it's called Zoolog, and it was about like a boy and his dog doing a scientific survey of a world full of monsters. And it was very lighthearted and very simple. But that was written as a webcomic. And it was so weird that, like, I don't want to say like we put less care into it, but Afterlife Inc. is my baby, and this was a side project. And it's so weird, like the level of engagement that went into something that was so clearly written as a webcomic, and people just loved it. And I guess
it's the type of, I suppose, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit there, John, in the fact that you've got the idea of like the long form, the long 10 volume stuff that will appeal to a certain reader. Then you've got like the kind of single issue set, or the Dark Horse model, where you get 4 issues and wait next year for the next lot. That appeals to a certain reader. And then you've got web comics, people who are just on the phones, just swiping on the way to, like, on tube journeys or train journeys or whatever. So they appeal. I think the fact that you're looking across all the different platforms for storytelling media, I think that's a good shout. Surely, I mean, you're going like cross country on all the different types of fan bases. So you're going to entice people to go from web to long form to mini to anthology and across the board. Surely,
it is really odd. Like, I don't think there's many other art forms on the planet where the medium, I'm going to get very kind of I'm going to put my beret on now, where the medium is so like closely tied to the thing like the story you're telling. It's so weird. As you say, like, you could have the best story in the world as a comic, but like if you're writing it as a web comic but you're releasing it as a book, is that going to work? Or now most people, a lot of creators starting now, they're not even bothering getting their own website. It's going to be syndicated on Webtoon or the other one, can't remember, or it's going to be just published straight to Instagram. And it's great for it's great for those platforms, but like you're not going to release Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol on Instagram, for example. No,
you're not. No.
And okay, I mean, I'd enjoy that, but
it takes some swiping to get through it all.
the weird thing is about, like, you said like that, the medium of like the long form graphic novel series not really existing anymore. like, and this is where I've just made a rod for my own back, because I'm like, I'm determined to tell this story,
Go for it.
and it's going to be.
You should absolutely.
Oh,
you
yeah,
should definitely go for it.
No, and I'm doing it, but I'm also aware that, like, God, there must be easier ways to make a living here, because you don't get any if you're doing a really long form story, because like we're 10 years in and we're 2/3 of the way through the story. There's going to be another trilogy, and it's like you don't get any awards for completing the middle of your story. You know what I mean? Everyone cares at issue 1, and if I make it to the end, everyone will care then.
You see, kind of. I don't know. You know, I mean, we all know The Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie, and that's slap bang in the middle.
Yeah, this is there's a
big. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, and if you haven't seen it, shame on you. But the hook at the end of that movie absolutely changes everything. So if you've got that beat in you somewhere in, and then that's what
now
you're
saying
for.
it, like, it's funny. Like, I've never studied like story structure. Like, in many ways, I'm still just kind of making this up as I go along. But there is some truth, I think, to the idea that like the second act of your story is generally where everyone's at their lowest point. And yeah, like the end of the book Death, the end of our second act. Yeah, I think it's like, oh, okay, like this is the game changer right now. And I guess I wasn't. It makes me sound like I planned the whole thing, but
I tell you what, why don't we just say that you did?
If you I know you're going to go and fix this, but if you cut the preceding 2 minutes.
Nope. What? Make you sound smart and me dumb? No, that's not how it works. That way.
But it's weird in a way. Like, I've done other things in that decade. Like Afterlife, I think, hasn't, stopped me from doing other things. But this really does feel like my kind of mission in a way. Like, this is the big one. Yes. And it is almost like I can't quite rest until it's done. And I know that we've got a few more years ahead of us before we reach the end.
Yeah, absolutely. You're doing a great job. Let's have a quick look. Boom, the Book of Death. Dum dum dum. I like how it's changed. The first one was all light, and this is like, boof, we're in darkness. Come on. Again, another panic of artists, to say the least. Even more so this time, isn't it? Look at them.
Yeah, 100%. We
Jackson again,
because he as the series kind of progressed, it started transitioning. I think from volume 3 onwards, from being like a collection of shorter chapters, which allowed us to mix up the art team, to being kind of long form stories. So like volume 3 was our kind of big blockbuster moment. That was like a big kind of one art team, the whole book. Volume 4, which we're kind of seeing now as we scroll through it, was very much the same. This is David's artwork here, and inked by Mike Bunt and coloured by Vivi Glass. And good memory, John. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and lettered by my lovely wife. And
I was going to ask who Lucy was.
Yeah, no. Lucy is when we met. She wasn't massively into comics. She was more of a book person. Over the course of 10 years, she's gone on to be one of the founding members of our company, Big Crunch Studios, and also kind of letters like 99% of like everything we do. So
cool. So in that case, let me do this. Don't forget to credit letters. See, I'm on a bit of a trip at the minute. There seems to be an idea in Big 2 Comics that the writer gets a mention on the cover, the artist gets a mention, and the colorist gets a cover mention. The letterer, nope, not a single thing. And it's like, why? It bugs me. It bugs me to high heaven.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, particularly this is why Lucy's contribution to the series has been great, because particularly as we get further into this book in particular, we've got lots of kind of. It gets a bit kind of like Sandman and the Endless, really, where we've got all these different characters, all of whom have completely unique speech bubbles kind of interacting. And like, I can attest, like the amount of work she puts into it. Like it's a mammoth undertaking, and you know, you try, you know, when you're talking to you know, quote unquote normal people, and they say like, "Oh, what do you do?" And you're like, "Oh, well, we make comics and stuff." And you know, first question is, "Well, do you draw it?" I'm like, "Well, no, but I write it." And then
you mean
go
as
on
a
to
writer?
Yeah, I know. Like, comics get written, and then you have to explain. Well, yeah, they also have letterers as well. Like, there's people who just assemble the damn thing, and it's very time consuming.
I'm a big American football fan. I always think when it comes to putting a comic together, it's like an American football team. Yeah, you cannot do one thing without the other. It's just the way it is, right? So, you know, for your quarterback to throw the 50-yard touchdown pass, you need an offensive line to block for you. You need a receiver to be able to beat the defender. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And that's comics all over.
Because you try to find analogies, don't you? You go like, oh, is it like, I don't know, are comics like making a film? Like, is the writer the director? Is the artist like the, I don't know, principal photographer? It gets a bit kind of woolly. Yeah. It's like, as you say, it's like, it's a team, whatever it is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
As writer co-creator, are you how are you from? Because a lot of writers that I speak to tend to be a little bit. How can I put this? Can be a little take over Ted, because they become mini editors of themselves. If that makes sense. Is that you, or are you kind of like a little bit more? You know what? I've been doing this for 10 years. I think I can lay back and let them do this stuff.
It's a really great thing is it's like my scripts I've been told are very detailed, and just I don't really know any other way of doing it other than my own, but yeah, the scripts are quite detailed, and then they are always and I'll get photo references and images to help the artist where needed, but it's always caveated by the biggest disclaimer at the top saying, if you can do this, if you know a better way of doing this, please do. Because surely like the trick is to assemble the best team possible and let them do their thing. Pal. Yeah, like I mean, David's thing in this story is that like his artwork is big and bombastic, and everyone is like hyper muscled and like looks like a supermodel, and it's like, yeah, and because he's great for this story because it's big and stupid and like daft momentous events are happening. It's like if I was having to tell him to go like, no, David, this actually be like really, really thoughtful and like watercolor and like we need something a bit more pastel.
It's like it's a pensive dinosaur, not an
dinosaur. It's really it's an exploration of the you know, inherent tragedy of being with dinosaurs. But again, like if you're having to hammer the artist's work into a different shape, it's maybe the failing is on you as an editor for making that artist work that way in the first place, if that makes sense. Like
no. It's like we said earlier, isn't it? The artist has got to match the beat of the story.
Yeah, because 100%. And like I'd like to say that like, oh, all I do is write, and I'd love that. I'd love to just be purely kind of creative the whole time, but a vast amount of the job is wearing, I guess, your kind of like your producer's hat or your editor's hat, and trying to just bring it all together. So I mean, we jumped ahead now, and this is
ahead. Just because I want to see the contrast of the different art styles. I wanted to really show that.
So. It's a fun page you've jumped to because this is a story from Volume 5, Glory Days, which I think as a volume is the story I'm the most proud of, where we went back to doing like lots of anthology pieces. So this story has got the most artists on. We did a particular story where the artist changes every scene, let alone every story, because we were telling a time travel-y, twisty kind of story.
Oh, not timey-wimey stuff. Oh.
I refrained from saying timey-wimey. My thinking was, if we have a character in the pages of this comic who sees time as a physical landscape they can walk through, how would that manifest on the comic page?
Good and shout.
Again, this is where you're like making a rod for your own back. Maybe I should just tell a simpler story. But the page
no, that's the wrong answer. You get these grandiose ideas and you put them on paper, and that's how it works. That's how that's how you develop something that lasts 10 years. If you want to take a simple attack, then no one's going to read it. Say, oh, there, look at that, yeah. Look at the multiverse story. Oh, yeah. That's not going to work anymore, man.
This is why, like, this is why genuinely, like, what I don't necessarily, I don't aspire to be cool. I genuinely aspire to be weird, because I think I can't. Somebody told me once, I think, that like weird is what sticks with you. Like, weird is an instant reaction where you kind of go like, ugh, you know, I'm not really sure what that is, but like it made you think a bit. And sometimes it's not going to click with people, but sometimes then they come back to it and they kind of like reappraise it.
Yes.
But the page we've landed on is quite fitting, because you're actually seeing, it might be hard to imagine with my youthful features, but this is actually my only cameo in the series, from a time where I was actually sporting a mustache. I was going for a more serious hipster look, which does not suit my naturally unthreatening face. And so yeah, this is myself playing an egotistical reporter, and Nick, my partner in crime from Big Punch Studios, playing a long-suffering cameraman.
He looks familiar, Nick. I've got to say, he looks familiar.
He's.
Look, the dog's wearing a life preserver. Does he think you're going to drown?
You maybe under deadlines. If you see him in person, this is quite an uncanny representation. This is drawn by Kit Palmer, who's fantastic, and this is also perhaps the most self-indulgent and inside baseball series of jokes I've put in the comic, because while the story is going on, we have it's all a bit up itself, but we've got a reporter and a cameraman arguing with each other and talking about how, as he says, your art is a silent medium. Shut up and respect it, basically.
Let's have another contrast. I've just seen something that I want.
Jump to a random page.
No, I could show you that I can scroll across the bottom and look at the pages before I get there.
Ooh.
There you go.
Oh, this is Kit was Chris Wozencroft did the art here. Yeah, he, got me on put me on the spot there. But yeah, the only time I worked with Chris, but he was really good, actually. Really pleasure to work with.
I love the colours on this. Absolutely, I love the hues. Definitely.
Oh, it's lovely. Yeah. Our big thing is that when you're setting a story in an afterlife, which has like a ton of like weird arcane technology and weird sources of energy, it's like, okay, well, what glows pink, what glows blue, and what every kind of random color is generally being associated with some kind of story point at this point in the story.
I suppose the afterlife for each character is subjective for themselves.
Well, it's weird because we've got this. The afterlife itself the story itself takes place in the Empyrean, which is.
I think I have a picture of that somewhere.
Oh, interesting.
I think
it's like the afterlife that nobody was expecting, basically. So generally, everyone is either disappointed or just kind of cautiously optimistic now that the worst is behind them.
What do I have? Is that this?
Oh, let's find out. Yes, there we go. Yeah. So they absolutely nailed it. Good work. Yeah. So this is it's like a seven-tiered kind of gold structure floating in an endless white void. And it was once ruled by 7 archangels. A mysterious event called the Calamity wiped them from existence. And in the kind of mass upheaval and chaos that followed, Jack was able to kind of sink his teeth in and form a company. And in fact, if you want a visual aid like no other,
hang on, let's get there. There you go. Let me just bring us in bigger.
There we go. I actually made the damn thing out of wood and modeling clay and a bit of 3D printing.
See, I think that should be on your Kickstarter. If you
one of a kind.
Yes, one of a kind. You pledge, I don't know, £1,000. You too can have your own.
And we also have, because again, next to me at my desk, we've got a few kind of pieces of some artifacts that accompany us to shows. So we've got the Imperium model, and this is a cuddly toy of Nuriel, our 100-foot tall flaming blue lion, who's actually very polite, which Lucy made probably, actually about a decade ago. So
there you go.
Yeah, cool. all the little treasures of a weird 10 years in publishing.
That's absolutely great to see them, though. It obviously shows how much of an impact doing the books had. So it's absolutely great.
Well, I thank you. I mean, thank you. I mean, like probably one of the most surreal experiences of my life was having people cosplay as Jack.
Yeah, well, that was cool. That was
first time it happened. It was at a show we didn't go to. I felt so bad. We had a bunch of people saying, "Oh, did you see that Jack Fortune cosplay who was walking around Plymouth?" And I was like, "No," because we weren't there. And incredibly, we were able to track the guy down and send him a book as a thank you. But then, I think in 2016, I was actually able to meet a different Jack Fortune in person. And there's an incredibly surreal photo of me shaking his hand, and that was probably one of the most surreal experiences of my life, if I'm honest, because he went all in. Like he had a Jack has a massive red tie which floats through the air, and so he properly did it. He proper choking hazard. It was trailing down by his feet. It was incredible. Absolutely blew my mind.
Excellent. Okay, so the publication, it's on Kickstarter. You're fully funded. That means if people want to back the book now, you are guaranteed to get the thing. So that's good. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, we've just wasn't expecting it to go so well, and we've now announced some stretch goals as well to hopefully reward people further for their incredible generosity.
Just give me a sec. We'll have a quick look at those whilst we're talking. Share that. Where we're at. Stretch goals. Let me get to the right bit. Stretch goals. Boom.
You shouldn't have to go too far, I would say. There we go.
So, is this if you hit 10,000? Yes.
Yes. So the first one is I've been working developing for a good portion of last year an Afterlife Inc tabletop role-playing game.
Cool.
And
this isn't the first game you've done. You've done other games as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we at Big Punch we do a lot of random junk, to be honest. But we made a card game called Sandwich Masters back in 2015, and last year we released the first expansion called Bread Rolls.
Please tell me there's a card that says "You are now in a pickle."
Oh my god! No, okay. Well, we failed. Then it just hasn't happened.
Now, feel free to add a card. There you go.
We do have a card called Dictator Cheese, which is lactose intolerant. if that works. But yeah, and Nick, as one of his projects, he's made an incredible solo RPG called Colossal, which is full credit to him, has been absolutely blowing up lately. So this is kind of like the world we find ourselves in, and when we're not doing comic junk, we're playing around with games ideas.
Cool. Not sure you should describe them as junk, though. I'm not sure that's the best marketing technique. I'm just saying.
You might. I'm not very good at promotion. No, it's entertaining junk. It's low art. It's what I aspire to make.
Excellent. All right. Well, cool. So yeah, your stretch goals are there. I think you know what. I mean, what we said, we got 9 at the time of recording. You're at 9.3 now, so you're not a million miles away from that first one, and you've still got like 3 weeks to go. It is crazy.
Yeah,
how popular.
I know it's bizarre, and I feel. I mean, if anyone's listening and you've pledged, I am immensely grateful. Thank you so much.
I'm rechecking the page just to make sure. Oh, we're still there at the same time.
Oh, it's been a quiet 50 minutes.
Yeah. How dare someone not back in the last 50 minutes? What's that all about? Yeah, I don't know. All right, excellent. So there you go. That's everything about Afterlife Inc. Some extra stuff thrown in there. You've seen some of the pictures. You can go and check the Kickstarter. I'll show it one more time. There's the Kickstarter address. Type in Kickstarter, type in After Inc. You will get there. As John says, type in Afterlife Inc. into your Google search, and the SEO will sort you out on that. For everything else, you want to keep up to date with everything that John's doing, as well as the book itself. There is your social medias. All right. Very good. Dead easy to follow. Just click, and I'm sure you'll be able to interact and suggest cards for the various games. Just so you know, I'm in a pickle is my card, and that's what I'm hanging my hat on. Just saying.
You'll get your 10%.
I want the proper one, none of this sandwich pickle stuff. I want the full Branston pickle. You know what I'm saying? With the crunchy bits in. There you go. All right. John, thank you so much for spending the time with me. I really do appreciate it. Well done on your great book. Books, they're great. They look fantastic. I love the contrasts between the different chapters. The anthology style works really well. Before you go, I will tell you my daft joke in relation that made me think of, right? So basically, apologies to recruitment consultants. A recruitment consultant gets hit by a bus. He ends up going to the pearly gates. At which point, St. Peter says, you know what? We've never had a recruitment agent. Off you go, downstairs. So he goes downstairs to hell, has a walk around hell. There's beautiful women offering him grapes. They're offering him wine. They're offering him all sorts of massages, that sort of thing. And the devil says, you can't stay here. You have to decide. So off you go back up to heaven. So he goes up the stairs, gets to heaven, and all he gets in heaven are clouds and harp music. And he's like, you know what? No, I want to go back downstairs. So he says to St. Peter, I'm done. Send me back downstairs. I'm gone. So he goes back downstairs. There's a beautiful women and the lovely beds and everything. Goes to sleep. Next day, wakes up in chains, pitchforks sticking in his ribs, fire, brimstone everywhere. So he goes shouting at the devil. He says, oh, devil, what's going on here? Yesterday, it was all babes and beds and wine and grapes. Now it's all pitchforks and chains. He says, I was the recruitment consultant. Yesterday you were a temp. Now you're here permanently. And on that note, I've been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. Thank you, John, for spending the time and listening to my terrible joke.
Thank you for having me.
And don't forget to check out all your other shows on the UCPN, including Flipside Focus for everything that's independent, the No Prize podcast for everything that's Marvel, Disney, and MCU, and of course, my personal favorite, the Old Timers Comic Book Show, where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. Check it out, John. You might find some of those Doom Patrol and Vertigo books on there. All right, excellent. Okay, so I've been your host. All that's left for me to say is adios.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.com, all about comic pop culture.